It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. That is Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman. Hope you had a great holiday weekend. And Logan, it's time to get ready for a football game. Time to get ready for a season. It's here. It's week one.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. And like in classic NFL fashion, you know, like the week one's going to be interesting, even though it's against like a team that's just okay. So, you know, always fun storylines in the NFL, and it's good to be talking about football finally. So.
For sure. So we will preview the game itself later in the week. Right now, though, kind of a season preview, answering some of the biggest questions, and then we'll end with some of the season total over-unders, you know, Sam Howell touchdowns, Terry McLaurin receptions, all that kind of stuff at the end of the podcast. Let's start, though, with this one from Josh Stack on Twitter. He said, no love from the national pundits for the team this year. Is it Ashburn syndrome to think the team will be a playoff caliber competitive team?
I mean, kind of. I mean, like when you take a step back, right, and just like look at it from a national pundit's perspective, which we talked about. Like you're starting a 5th round quarterback, and it's not that he's untalented. It's not that he hasn't been good, but like the history and the track record of even rookie 1st round quarterbacks playing really high level football is not great. So you kind of have to count that in. So let's say Sam throws for 25 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. Like that's a pretty good year, but it's like kind of middle of the road.
One of the best years a quarterback here has had in a decade.
Right. But it's like, you know, is that enough to win you a whole bunch of games? I don't know. So there's that. I think the O-line kind of mixing up is interesting, you know, in terms of like you're having, 4 new starters, and like guys have been in the organization. Obviously Cosby's been here, Sadiq's been here, but 4 new starters in terms of position and what they're doing. That's like usually not a great sign. Obviously, a new play caller is a big thing. Like it takes time to learn new offenses. It takes time to get stuff installed. So I'd say like that's something that I'm really kind of keeping an eye on. You know, it's just like if you're someone outside looking in, you're not watching practice every day. Like those things are tough. They're really, really tough. And then when you look at the variance in defensive production year to year, which is so closely tied to strength of schedule, this strength of schedule is much harder than it was last year. So, you know, nationally, you're probably expecting some type of defensive regression, even though that group looks really, really good. So it's like all of those things kind of culminate in this, well, you know, they might be a talented team. They might be good. They might have upside, but 2023 doesn't look like it's going to be a very, very productive year for them. Now, like I'm cautiously optimistic that they're going to outperform that because of what EB's done this offseason, and what EB can do, or what I've seen EB do just from like, you know, what that Kansas City offense has the potential to bring, what a West Coast offense in general does for a young quarterback, how Sam has performed. I think they'll exceed expectations. The question is like, what does that look like? Is that 10 wins? Is that, you know, 9? Because like right now I think they have us winning 6 games. Is that correct?
6.5. Yeah.
6.5. Yeah. So, and I think it's tough. Like the schedule's tough this year. So it's not like, I think it's a little bit of aspirin. I think it's a little bit of, you know, the kind of national perspective on the team. But I do think, I think some of that stuff is warranted. I mean, I'm not talking bad about the organization. I love what they've done. I think they're in a good spot, but there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. And we have not played an actual football game yet. So like they'll remain unanswered probably till like week 5 or 6. So.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said is true, but I don't think it's Ashburn syndrome to think this team could be playoff competitive when they were last season and their offense stunk. Like, that's the thing that I think gets missed by the national pundits is people think this was like a 4-win team last year or something. It wasn't. They were an 8-1 football team, and Carson Wentz, who was abysmal, started 6 games, and Taylor wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire, although he figured out enough to win. And then, obviously, Carson comes back in that Cleveland game, and kaputs goes the season. But the offense in general was incredibly unproductive, even when they found ways to win games. And the defense didn't even start that well, and they won 8 games. And so I know the strength of schedule is harder. I would be stunned if the offense isn't better, if not, like, I think the upside is significantly better, but I think at minimum they are better. And I think the defense is going to be better this year if this John Allen plantar fasciitis doesn't linger, which is a gigantic gigantic question mark. I mean, the linebacker is also a huge question mark, but they had that question last year. I think the secondary is going to be better this year. Like what it was post William Jackson III was a totally different group back there. And I think that they'll be closer to that, even if you have a rookie starting in Emmanuel Forbes. But I just, to say that if the threshold is playoff caliber competitive, to me, yeah, that's the minimum expectation. If they're not that, then there's going to be massive changes, and there should be massive changes because of the talent level on this team. And that's not me wishing for that to happen by any stretch of the imagination. Clearly, I would rather cover a winner, and I don't like seeing people lose their jobs, yada, yada, yada. But realistically, with the talent that they have and what they've been building over the last couple of years, and with what I think Bieniemy is capable of, I think they should be playoff caliber competitive. It's going to be hard, but they should. Like that's not an outrageous thought to have.
Yeah, but I think it's like when you say should, like a reason you're saying should is because of all the question marks that we just discussed, right? And I think also you look around the division and you say like Philadelphia, like probably the best team in the division. I think Dallas got a lot better with the addition of like Dalvin Cooks and Stephon Gilmore in the back end. And again, that doesn't make them a perfect.
Brandon Cooks you're talking about on the wide
what
receiver.
I say? Yeah, what
Dalvin.
I say? Yeah, Brandon Cooks, excuse me.
Yeah, Dalvin's playing running back for the Jets.
Yeah, so, I'd say like they've gotten better, and again, like, I'm not saying this is a bad team, but, you start a rookie corner, like they're going to go through their lumps, right? You mentioned the linebackers, like we've been kind of up and down on them. The health of the defensive line, we haven't even talked about Chase. Like it's NFL football, right? I was talking with the guys, Santana and Fred on another podcast about this, and like there's no like easy layup wins, and this team is definitely one that's not built for like easy layup wins the way like Kansas City is, right? Where you're just like better than everybody. You have the best player in football on your team. You've got a great scheme. You've got a team that's built to and knows how to win. Like we're not quite there yet. I am optimistic. Like I do think that having EB here is very, very valuable, but I do think I think there's a little bit of rose-colored glasses with this, a little bit, because like you're assuming that Sam Howell plays good football, and I think that is.
I mean, kind of, but I'm not even saying that. Like, I'm assuming that he's playing better football than Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke did last year.
What was the touchdown interception ratio for those three guys last year, or two guys together? That would be my question. And because I remember I looked this up earlier this offseason, like that's a pretty good ratio. It wasn't like amazing, but it was like pretty good. And does Sam outperform that? And it would be a crazy kind of I think it would be precedent setting for a young player to throw like that. So
Wentz was 11-9.
Okay.
And Taylor Heineke was 12-6.
12-6. All right, so that's
23-15.
15. So does he do that? That's a good year for a young player.
Yeah.
Like, and then,
but it's also like
against
that's
tougher
one
competition.
part of the equation, though. Like, obviously, how do you move the ball? Drives can get finished in other ways.
Sure.
But it just, man, I don't know, man. I
just,
the process last year was so bad.
I guess what I'm saying is it feels that way because we watch it every day. If we didn't watch it every day and we were just national media, we'd be like, no way that's going to work. You got a guy calling plays for the first time in his whole career. You got a guy who's installing his own offense for the first time. Historically, those things take time to develop. Sam Howell, like everyone agrees he's talented now. Everyone saw that Monday night game. Everyone's super jazzed, fired up, whatever it is. But like he's a young football player. Young quarterbacks have an acclimation period. You're starting 4 new people on the offensive line. Like it's not just like a walk-in playoff ready team here. There are questions that need to be answered. Now, I think Juan Castillo and Travell Wharton have done a great job with the O-line. I think that group's going to exceed expectation. But do I think that they're going to exceed expectation because I watch them every single day? Probably. Do I think Sam's going to exceed expectation because I watch him every day and I go to Ashburn all the time? Probably. Am I stoked on EB because I see him every day? Probably. So that's what I'm saying. I think there is a little bit of shine because we're out there all the time, Craig. And like I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm saying like that's why I think there's this tremendous optimism because we have a little bit more information. But that information comes not knowing what Philly's practices look like or what Dallas's practices look like. So I think that's kind of where I'm at is like we have all this information around our team, but like we don't have information about the other teams in the division even to kind of say, oh, like this is like what it would look like, I guess.
So here's my question though, is like we have the information, and while we don't have it about the other teams, what we have on this team is good. It's not like, like if this team is executing at a high level in practice and this team is, doing the right things and this team is sharp, like at what point does it not that it doesn't matter what the other teams are doing, but like if this team executes well and the talent here is better than people outside who don't know think it is, like, doesn't that give us a knowledge advantage? And I do think sometimes you get way caught up in your own stuff, and there's obviously an objectivity that is very helpful, and the more you know about the more things, ideally you can come to better conclusions. Yeah. But it would be different to me if we saw this team every day and we're like, I don't know, they're pretty mixed bag, like they're actually not that sharp, they're not on top of the details, but they're talented, so let's see how it goes when they go up against other teams. What we've seen is a team that is on the screws on a lot of the stuff that we have missed or been missing here in the past. And so if other outside pundits don't have that information, to me, that's where they're underselling this team, and we actually have an advantage there. It doesn't mean it's going to, not be hard to face Philadelphia or Dallas or Buffalo in week 3 or whoever you want to talk about. But like the stuff that has been problematic here in the past, where we've seen it even in preseason and in training camp, has not been as bad this year, and in some areas has been pretty damn good. And that to me is the biggest difference.
And I would say to you, I think this probably comes from having been on different teams with different organizations, different off seasons, that type of stuff, is you always think you're doing the right stuff. You always think you're ahead of the curve. Like even when it's bad, you always think you're progressing. There's like this confidence about it. And I think because of our proximity, we're kind of infected by that optimism, because like to really know like, oh, it's sharp here. Right. And I know it's sharp because I've seen multiple training camps, but maybe Kansas City's
That's
even
what I'm
sharper.
saying. Like, it's
but
not
let me finish my thought. So maybe Kansas City's even sharper or Philly's even sharper. And like the standard of what excellence looks like, or what elite offenses or what elite groups look like, or what elite skill position groups look like, looks and feels different. Like we're like, oh man, John's balling in camp. But everybody's got a guy who's balling in camp, one of their one receivers. You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure. Terrell Pryor had one of the greatest training camps I've ever seen in my life.
And so that's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying is that it's just, I'm not saying that our evaluation is incorrect. Our evaluation is incomplete, is what I would say. And that incomplete evaluation, and it's not our fault. We can't go to Philly's training camp. We can't go to Dallas's training camp. We don't know what that looks like. Like, so we just have this information. And so there's nothing to say like, it's easy to say, oh yeah, the O-line's looking way sharp. They're improving. They're exceeding expectations. And then we go to Philly and we're like, oh, well, like that O-line's amazing. And that quarterback's amazing. And that skill group's amazing. And I'm not saying that's one of the better teams in football. That's one of the better rosters in football. So you probably would say that. But because of our proximity, our evaluation is incomplete. And I agree with what you're saying. Like, we've got good skill position players, yes, but so does everybody else in the division. Maybe not the Giants, but we're like, oh, optimistic about the O-line because we all thought they were going to be terrible, and they've exceeded that slightly. But are they a good offensive line would be my question. And you just go around, like look at Philly's O-line compared to our O-line, or look at the Giants O-line or defensive line, excuse me. And it's like what is the deviation? What is the separation between those groups? It's really hard to tell, because we haven't watched those other practices, would be my thought. So I'm not saying that we're wrong or that our evaluation's poor of the roster. I'm just saying we don't have other information. And because of that lack of other information, you're going to bias to what you know. I got a funny story. So when I used to take Spanish in high school, I was terrible at Spanish. Like, I'm a bad speller. I'm not good with other languages, right? And I would get the Scantron and I'd look down and it'd be like, oh, I know that word, that Spanish word. That's got to be the answer. And you bias to things that you're familiar with, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think we just naturally bias towards the Commanders in this case. Again, so there is a little bit of rose color. I do think that doesn't dissuade me from thinking that they can be good, but I also think there's a lot of really, really good football teams around the NFL, and we just don't know, especially with the strength of schedule change, like how good this team can be. And it's just an unknown thing at this point, I think.
Yeah, I hear you. I would just say this. This is my last ditch, pushback on here. The Baltimore practice went really well. And that is the one. I mean, obviously, they also went 3-0 in the preseason. That means nothing because the majority of the snaps in those games are played by guys that are no longer wearing the uniforms of the teams that were on the field those days. They've all been cut. You get the point. However, the Baltimore practice, like you see, by the way, the difference in an elite quarterback and what Sam Howell is. Like Howell did well in those practices, but Lamar was, you go, whoa, like that dude that's different. Like you can see it, but you watch Jahan Cook, the Ravens guys. Now, by day 2, they didn't have any of their guys left, but like day 1, going against the Marlon Humphreys, whatever, like he and Terry, like they did well. Curtis, on down the line, you're like, oh yeah, these guys are really, really good. You see the offensive line hold up better than we thought they would. They actually look better in those practices than they did against the Commanders D-line, which makes you think that, maybe this Commanders D-line is actually as good as advertised, and this offensive line maybe isn't struggling as much as we thought. They're just facing one of the best D-lines in football. So I think the Baltimore practice tells us something. And also, I don't know, I just go to the threshold of the question here is really what I'm saying. I'm not trying to convince anybody this is a 10, 11, 12 win team. I think if they stay abundantly healthy, which they're already not, and catch a couple of breaks, like could they? Sure.
I agree.
Predict that? Absolutely not. But playoff caliber competitive, yeah, I think they should be. I don't think they're a 6-win team. I know Vegas says they're 6 or 7 win team, and Vegas is not wrong very often, but I tend to think that they're going to be better than that.
I think maybe that's where I'm getting caught up. Maybe the roster's playoff talented, but there are some limitations to the roster in terms of youth at the quarterback position, inexperience with the play caller, offensive line health that makes you say, hey, because like the other thing you look at is you look at the schedule and you say, which quarterbacks are they playing this year? And they're playing a bunch of really good quarterbacks.
Yeah. I mean, I know you have to look at strength of schedule, but also
that's a huge thing.
Schedule. It is, but like it's also, we don't actually know what the strength of the schedule is. We know what it looks like right now, but if I'm
not even talking about like I'm just saying quarterbacks.
Like right, but like if by Christmas Eve Zach Wilson's playing instead of Aaron Rodgers, that's a very, very different schedule.
It's a very different schedule, 100%. But I'm just saying, like as of this second, as of right now,
it's hard.
There's a lot of good quarterbacks on, and like again, I agree. Like there's a lot of variation, there's a lot of flexibility with other positions, but if you're a top 10 quarterback, top 5 quarterback, like usually those guys win football games. And we're playing a couple of those guys this year. So that's just my thought. I think that's the other thing that needs to be considered in this equation. But I agree with you. I think it's a talented team. I think they're competitive. I love what EB's doing. I love the maturation at all spots. But I'm also ready to acknowledge that like it's an incomplete evaluation. Like it's a proximity bias type thing. So I just think that it's important for fans to kind of keep that in mind in terms of like managing expectations. Like I expect this to be a team that's in a lot of games that last year they wouldn't have been in just because the coaching is going to be better. But like, does that manifest into a playoff push? I don't know.
It's a team that I expect to be hovering around 500 the entire year.
I think that's probably fair. And then maybe if you get lucky, like to your point, if you get like a couple breaks, things fall your way. Not a bad spot. Maybe you're
pull an upset or two. Get lucky on the injury front, either for you or against somebody else. Like but I don't think this is a team that we're going to look up and be like, God, they're way out of the playoff picture. They're 4 games under 500. That's just not a place I anticipate this team being at any point this season. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
That's why they play the games. Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. That's Logan Paulson. I'm Craig Hoffman. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you are watching or listening right now. Full episodes on YouTube at 1067 The Fan. Subscribe to the audio on your favorite podcast platform, which might just be that free Odyssey app. Okay. From Disco, another mailbag question. What do you think Curtis Samuel's role will be in the offense this year? I feel like we talked a lot about that in the spring and then kind of quieted down on it throughout the summer. After watching the summer take place and kind of preparing for the season, what do you think his role is ultimately going to be?
I don't think you saw anything too specific. Yeah, and like, let me just kind of flesh this thought out. Nothing too specific. I think you saw like a general thought process that they want to use him in kind of that Kadarius Toney way, like where he might get a touch here from the backfield, or they're going to motion him or jet sweep or whatever. But also him playing receiver, because I do think after watching, I think they're very, very similar players. So I do think like that is something I would expect. You didn't get to see a lot of it because I'm sure they're open practices. People are taking videos. You don't want to put too much out there. But I also think that, like just in terms of that, like those kind of preliminary tastes of what they were doing in practice, I think you saw, just a thought process. How do we use this guy's skill set? He's tremendously athletic. He's got a skill set that's very unique in terms of like he's very strong. Even when you watch him do like one-on-ones and stuff, he's very, very strong. Like not just at the catch point, but at the top of routes, like throwing guys off and getting off of holding and things like that. So you want to use that strength, you want to use that explosiveness, and you want to find ways to get him incorporated in the offense. For a guy who's maybe not the most refined route runner of all time, like how do we get him easy touches and let him use his explosiveness? So without giving too much away, I just think there's a general kind of thought that that's the role I see for him, in terms of him getting touches like in a myriad of ways.
I think all three guys, but especially McLaurin and Samuel, will get, I'm calling like designated touches, organized touches, whatever you want to, purposeful touches. I think Dotson's going to get his in the flow of the offense, and he's so good as a route runner that EB is going to be like, yep, we're good. And occasionally, like, will he get a screen or reverse maybe? But like, I think Terry's going to get 1 to 2 of those a game, whether it's like the jet pass where you just tap it up to the guy and let him run or whatever. Like, we'll see Curtis lined up all over the place and throughout the season talking about all over the place.
Sure.
And I think he'll get a couple of design touches throughout games on a pretty regular basis. But I do think he's almost underrated as a receiver, to your point. Like, he can run routes. He's got strong hands. Like, he'll make clutch, tough contested catches. Like, he didn't have a ton of catches last year, but how many clutch third downs did he convert for them? So I think that they will, because of the volume of plays they should run being more efficient offensively, like he should get a lot more touches this year than he did last year. I think Terry and Jahan, like, they're all going to get touches because, again, they're just running more plays. But there will be times, and I'm sure some of it will be opponent specific. If they think they can get something over on a specific team, like, they'll use that. And he is a major weapon. I think the questions, too, are like, you can kind of ask the same question about Antonio Gibson. Like how specialty role does he become, or is he just kind of a rotation back, third down back kind of guy? Like I think there's really intriguing questions about those two guys in particular. And, as we're recording here, some more questions are coming in. Like, one of the questions I got for another mailbag is, like, is there a situation where either of them is around after this season? And I think the likelihood that both of them are around doesn't seem very high. But I think it's higher for Samuel on some kind of much smaller contractual number than it is for Gibson, just by the nature of wide receiver versus running back.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, if you're looking at guys who are going to, in my opinion, more likely to get some of those game plan touches, I think you say it's probably Curtis. And to your point, like, I'm not saying Curtis is a bad route runner. Just when you watch him, he lacks some of that, like, of that nuance,
not great.
That makes good route runners or makes average route runners in the NFL. Like, there's like an understanding of stem and space and leverage that is it's very specific, and it's hard to articulate to people who don't know route running at a high level. But he's not that's not his forte. Like, he's a strength and power and speed guy, and so you want to find ways for him to utilize. And again, like in training camp, for example, I thought he did a great job. Like, it's not always the prettiest thing of all time, but he's strong and he's fast. He gets open. So, like, there's also value in
too.
that. Yeah.
So that short area burst. So sometimes if it's not pretty, like, you get to the top of a route and you just get to the next spot faster than 100%. The DB because you've got pure athleticism.
And there's like what is that old adage? There's like a million ways to skin a cat. That's a weird expression, but like there's all sorts of different styles to get there, And I think he's got a style that maybe isn't like, like very Instagram friendly, because it's not like, oh, double stick, work the outside release, lead back and break out. It's not like that, but it's solid and it wins. And I think there's value there, because like you mentioned, the Baltimore practice, like, he did a great job beating up on some corners. And was that their best corner group? Probably not. But I think he's the guy that I would think is going to get more specific touches as opposed to Gibson. And I think he warrants that, just because I think he's a little bit more of that kind of like elite athlete that you want to get those touches. And also, like, think about it. When Gibson's in the game, you treat him like a running back. When Curtis is in the game, you have to treat him like a receiver. So when you put him in the backfield, like an empty, or, like you say, you go 5 wide receiver personnel, or 3 wide receivers and 2 tight ends, or whatever the formation personnel allocation is. When you put him in the backfield, now all of a sudden that starts breaking defensive rules. They're like, well, he's in the backfield. Do we treat him like a receiver? Do we treat him like a running back? Can we blitz this? Is this true empty? And that's where the value of having that guy comes in. With Gibson, like, he's very skilled. I'm not trying to diminish his skill set, but from a defensive coordinator standpoint, when he lines up in the slot, he's a running back, because I don't fear his route running the same way that I do like a guy like Christian McCaffrey, for example, or Curtis Samuel. When he's in the backfield, he's a running back. So it doesn't really break the rules the same way that you get with Curtis. And I think that just having that different tag in terms of position is extremely valuable, and EB has shown a proclivity in Kansas City now, with using multiple tight ends, using different types of backs, using multiple receivers, because it dictates certain responses from the offense, or from the defense, excuse me. So I think that's why I'd say that. In terms of them being back next year, I think they both would need to be very productive in order for that to even be a conversation. And that's one of those big question marks. Like, is Curtis productive in this role? Is Gibson productive in his role? And what is the role? Like, if Gibson's just kind of a third down back, you can keep him at a good number. And I think, kind of irrespective, Curtis will be back at a much smaller number, because if you look at Kansas City, they can find guys kind of every year in the draft to fill that role. And while I think Curtis is special, he's not whatever he is, $13 million a year special for this role that you seem to be able to find, especially given the landscape of college football now. You can find that skill set pretty reticently, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing that people should be on the lookout for is like Terry lining up in the backfield. Not necessarily that he's ever going to get a handoff, but they'll throw screens to receivers like in the past, or things like that. Or you just line him back there to see what the defense does, and then you motion him back out to a receiver. But you start with him there, and things like that Kansas City's been doing for years, and Andy's probably been doing since he was in Philadelphia. I'd have to go back and watch 2005 Eagles tape, or 90s Packers tape when he was in Green Bay. But these seemingly little things that actually give the quarterback and the rest of the offense a ton of information that cause defenses to check and communicate and create confusion and give away what they're doing. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff as well that I think you can expect to see this year. And who knows, maybe Terry will get a handoff at some point in the year. But more likely you see it to kind of, hey, the star corner is following Terry around. See if you can find him in the backfield and then chase him around and, get a free release. There's just stuff you can do that I think EB will bring to this offense that Curtis will probably be the biggest beneficiary of. But Terry and possibly Jahan or Diami or whoever else might be a benefit of as well.
And let's be clear, kind of going back to that first question also, I think with an offense like this, where you see creative, productive, innovative mindset, all positions benefit. Like the tight ends will benefit, the receivers will benefit, the running backs will benefit. It just depends on who's getting the most kind of you had a very specific term. It was like game plan touches. Is that what we're using for that?
That works. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the person who's getting the most game plan touches, and game plan touches in this context are kind of like unconventional touches. I think that's going to be Curtis probably.
Yeah, probably. All right. Last one before we get to the over-unders. We've seen the practice structure change dramatically, not just in the tempo, but kind of what's actually being practiced. How does that change emphasis on situational football, where they've done a lot more 2-minute, a lot more third down, a lot more of that kind of stuff than what's been done in the past here? How does that translate into the season?
Well, I think, golly, there's so many benefits to this new practice structure. So let's talk high level, and then we'll kind of work our way to that more specific question.
Okay.
So one of the things I've noticed is they've done a lot more 7-on-7, and I was always the guy who's like, why so much 7-on-7? Team, that's where the value is. You need team. You need the offensive line out there. You need the working protections. And then I kind of thought about it. You can get the offensive line over with Juan Castillo and the defensive line doing inside run, doing pass rush, doing blitz pickup without the quarterback there. And they get way more reps and specific coaching to that activity that they're doing, while also getting the 7-on-7 stuff. So they'd finish the day with 115 reps, 120 reps in a practice, which to me is mind blowing. Because when Kyle was here, when Mike was here, we done well with like a big day would be like 70, like a ton of reps, So they are crazy in terms of their ability to maximize opportunities, maximize timings, maximize the situations like we're going to talk about in a second. I think you're basically doubling your practice, which is crazy to think about. So the O-line's instead of getting 15 minutes of individual, they're getting an hour and 15 minutes of individual, and then they do the team period, right? The skill guys get an hour and 15 minutes of individual 7-on-7 team skelly, and then they go to team period. And I was like, man, like they're doubling their practice time offensively, it's like ostensibly, like, which is crazy to think about. And so it was like the first day they came in and they started doing team run, and you'd never seen them do a team period the whole offseason, and it looks super crisp. You're like, it's because they've just been working it on the side, getting hundreds of undocumented reps, which is great. So that's the first thing I think is really fantastic about the new practice structure. And then you mentioned, I think this is huge, is that practice structure now allows you to maximize your third down opportunities. It allows you to maximize your red zone opportunities. Like think about how many days we're at practice, Greg, and we watched 7-on-7 in the red zone, and they're getting 40 reps in practice. Yeah. Like that's great for the starters. That's great for the backups. That's great for the third string guys. And I think that's one of the reasons why nothing looked too big. Like you're running a very specific game plan play with Bryson Tremaine for that touchdown in the Cincinnati game. Like he's motioning, come back across, and you can tell Cincinnati has no idea what's happening because it's kind of complicated. But Washington looks super crisp because they've been able to rep it with everybody. And I think to myself, like, that is insanely valuable, is because you've just get more reps. You can say, oh, hey, like this is the 5th time we're running this play in training camp, and we're going to get to see a new coverage in 7-on-7. We're going to get to see a new thing. And so it just allows you to be so much sharper and so much more detailed versus all these different looks, and just get more force, more football into these athletes' brains and in situations, in team, in whatever it is. So I think I think the benefit's going to be enormous, like in red zone, third down, 2-minute, all those things, just because they've gotten so much more volume of learning in addition to the walkthroughs and team, like the practice has just become way more productive.
Yeah, no, I also think that when you talk about this, like what you talk about with the red zone play with Tremaine, right? This is something that when you go back to actually the last question as well, the motions and stuff that Curtis will be involved with, I think this is fundamental to who they are. It's fundamental to the way the EB thinks about offense. Or a guy like Scott Turner, sorry to beat up on him or pick on him if people feel like I'm doing that, but like that was extra, that was bonus, that was cool stuff. That was like, oh, those are trick plays. Where it's like, no, a jet motion handoff is like part of our offense, and it's also setting up this other thing. And it's going to be involved more often because we can fake it and then do this other counter off of that. Like it's a fundamental piece. The reasons why you do it are things that you believe in at your core, not things that you're using to trick the opponent, if that makes sense, that differentiation. Yeah. And so whether it's the use of motion, different formations, doing a ring around the rosy before a play, like everything, even the stuff that is tricky, has a purpose. And I think that when you make that core and fundamental to who you are, and there's a good explanation of why, players understand it better and they're going to execute it better, and they've repped it a ton, and it feels far more comfortable, ultimately, is what I'm getting to them. So that every player, if they have to go in and be in on this particular play, they've repped it, they know it, they know why you're doing it, they understand it, they can go execute it. And I think that that's going to be huge. And if that's how they feel, not just about your base fundamental offense, but about your third down package and your fourth down stuff and your red zone stuff, like you're going to have a lot better execution. And I think that is what you see on top of the talent in a place like Kansas City, where yes, Mahomes sometimes runs around in a circle and then throws one sidearm and then gets in the defender's face and yells, "I am him." There's also just like a lot of basic stuff that gets executed at a high level successfully all the time. And when they get down in the red zone, you feel like they're going to score. And, is Travis Kelce really talented? Sure. But there's also some schematic stuff in the way that it was all prepared that makes it so that Travis Kelce, who should be the total focal point of a defense down there, is wide open way more than he should be.
Yeah, there's the schematic stuff, but also some of the best plays that Travis Kelce has, you can just tell they've repped it so much
Yep.
versus so many different coverages. Like he's got a corner, and I mention this corner thing all the time, and it's cover 4, and he should be a dead route, and he just sits down in the zone and catches a ball, and again that only happens if you've repped it a bunch with the quarterback, and so the increased volume of reps in practice I think is extremely, extremely beneficial to your general offense. I think that's one of the reasons why the O-line has looked so much sharper than people expected, because they've like literally just been, the process has been accelerated. The red zones look better. All the timings look better. It's because like and it's not just volume, it's the detail with which EB's coaching it, and then he's got his staff coaching it. So that's a huge factor, but it's so powerful as a coach to be able to say, hey, we've gotten more. It's like you're trying to teach somebody how to do a power clean. And it's like, imagine if I said, hey, we're just doing live power cleans. You're never going to get it. But if I say, hey, we're going to break these down, we're going to kind of put you over here, we're going to do this stuff and this stuff and this stuff, it helps kind of the final product. And I think that's what you see with the offense at the moment. And one of the reasons I think why we're both so optimistic is because like it's crisp in situational football, and usually that's the last thing to come. And they've prioritized that in practice. They've prioritized it with practice structure, and I just think it's exciting. I'm excited about it. So,
yeah. How confident on a scale of 1 to 10 are you teaching a power clean?
I'm pretty. I can teach a power clean. But I think the thing about power cleans is that everyone wants to be good at power cleans the same day you start.
Nope.
No. It's like a couple of probably like a 2-week, 3-week type of deal. And
if you can do it in 2 to 3 weeks, you are an excellent Olympic lifting coach.
So I had a buddy who gave me a secret, which I'll tell you about off the air, and it revolutionized how I teach it, and was very, very helpful. So
you're gonna have me you're gonna make me want to go do power cleans after the show. All right. Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. Logan Paulson there. Craig Hoffman here. Of course, you can catch me on the radio 4 to 7 each and every weekday. And then, Logan, you can catch us on the radio 10 to 1.
Right. That's right.
Pregame. Take Command pregame show. We're even calling it the same thing as the podcast now. The Take Command pregame show on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980 Burgundy and Gold Game Day returns Sunday, so make sure you are tuned in. We will also be streaming live as well, I believe, on both YouTube channels, so we'll shore all that up. And there's one more detail that we're not allowed to say yet, but we will share that hopefully on the midweek pod. Stay tuned to the radio show and the social medias and all that.
I'm excited. What is it? Have we talked about this?
I think so.
All right, well, then I forgot about it. Well, I'm excited to hear about it.
Well, I'll share that with you when you share your power clean tip with me off the air. All right. By the way, as for the podcast, if you're not subscribed, make sure you do. We return to our 3 times a week routine starting in week 2. We would be in week 1, but there's no game to review, and also it's a holiday week. So 2 pods this week, and then we go live on Sunday after the game to recap it. Okay. Final predictions. Let's. Thanks to FanDuel, unofficially, I'm just using their number. So it's not really thanks to FanDuel. It's thanks to the fact that FanDuel puts numbers on the internet. If they want to sponsor the show, they can. Over-unders for players for the season and 1 for the team. Howell, we'll start with him. Got 2 numbers for you. Passing yards first. 3,075.5. 3075.5.
Wow.
That's the over-under number for Sam Howell. I will say this. I will go first on this one. If he is healthy, he should smash that by a couple, maybe not smash, but by a couple hundred yards. I think he gets it.
Didn't we decide that was like exactly what we thought he would have? Is like 3,700 exactly?
No, that's the thing. It's 3,075, not 37.
Oh,
you got a number backwards. 3,075. If he's healthy, he should get that fairly easily. But we don't know with health. I mean, last year we were gung-ho on Carson Wentz's over and on that one because of health. For as bad as Wentz was, his yardage total was actually pretty high, and he would have easily gotten his number last year, and he played all 17 games. I think I'll still go over, but that's if he misses like 2 games, then you're in bad shape.
No, I agree. Because what was Daniel Jones last year? Didn't we look that up? It was like 35, maybe.
I'll have to look up in a second.
Yeah, so I think I'd probably go over, even if he's like, I think that's a very reasonable number. You did some math, which I know you're just not your strong suit, but we did like a math thing, and you're like, if he throws
I just did math on a calculator on my phone. That's the number he's got to average per game if he plays 17.
Thank you. Yes.
So
and I think he'll be over
only
that.
180 yards per game if he plays all 17 games. I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, and especially like with the formula that you've seen in the preseason, like they want to throw the ball. And it's not like they're going to be throwing the ball down the field a ton, but like they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. And I think he's going to have a lot of opportunities for, guys who are good after the catch to make plays. So I would say over. I don't think they're going to run the ball as much as people think. And I think that's good because I think that's smart football in 2023. But I'm going to say over.
Jones last year, 3,200 yards, 3,205.
I think that's, if he's hitting 32, I think we've got a very similar situation here. Like it might be 31, 32, 33, but I think that's kind of what I see Sam doing this year.
All right, so we're both going over. Let me redo the math real quick. So times 17 divided by, let's say he misses 2 games, he still only got to average 205 yards a game. I feel like
which is not insignificant, but
but with again, like all the screen yardage and the things that they want to do with the easy completions, hopefully it adds up pretty quick. Okay, this one's harder. Howell 17.5 touchdowns. So does he get to 18? Jones was 15-5 last year, by the way.
He was 15-5. See, that feels like a good number for me, but I like that 23 number. That 23 number feels good to me.
That Carson and Taylor combined for last year?
That's a lot, though. I'm going to say that seems right. Can you just say that's the right number?
I mean, that's why they put the hook in there, that 0.5, Logan. This is how gambling works. They put a 0.5, so you got to make a decision. If he's going to get to 18, he's over. 17, he's under.
I'm going to say over. I think he gets to 18 or 19. I think 20, something like that. You say over too? It's a lot of touchdowns, bro.
Yeah, if he gets to 1, if he averages 1 per game, he's under.
I think he'll have a game with 2. And I also think this is another thing about, at least watching Kansas City, and they have the best player in football, a little different dynamic, but they throw the ball in the low red more than most teams.
Yeah, and they have the tight end flip play. That's technically a passing touchdown, stuff like that. And
I think like the Bryson Tremaine touchdown in the third preseason game is a big part of what they want to do down there. So I would say, I think he's going to, in those situations, like more opportunities. Hopefully that leads to a bigger total. So I'm going to say over. Even if it's slightly over, I think over.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think that's exactly why you're right. Like the low red stuff where you get down there, they throw it in. I mean, not that he's going to do anything remotely close to Mahomes, but Mahomes the last couple of years, touchdown wise, is
it like 35 or something crazy like that?
Last year was 41. The year before was 37. So
Boom.
he's just got to get to.
So he's going to be way
17
over,
and a half. Seems easy all of a sudden. Just be half of Mahomes. Let's do it. All right. This one's tough. McLaurin, 69.5 receptions.
How many did you have this last year? Do you know?
Let me look. I was ready with a lot of numbers. This wasn't it. Last year, Terry had 77. He actually had 77 the last 2 years. He had 87 in 2020. Last time he was below this number was as a rookie. He had 58.
I think the only thing that would concern me about this is if Jahan really goes off or Logan really goes off and a lot of the production is diverted. I feel pretty confident about him being over on this. I think you've seen over the last couple of weeks that he's going to be a big feature of the offense, lining up in multiple spots. I mean, if he's healthy, obviously that's a huge if at the moment. But
that's my if.
Yeah, but and again, there's a lot of weapons here, but I don't think so. I think he's over that.
So if he's healthy, I think he's over. Toe injury before week 1 scares the Jesus out of me. If I had to bet this, I would go under.
You're going to go under because of the toe?
If I had to bet this right now, I do think they've done a good job. He's been in a boot. They're like, hey man, you be ultra conservative. You don't do anything until we get you in cleats to practice right before the game. But a toe injury, man, that scares me. Toe injuries are funky, man.
Yeah.
And they definitely can come back and they can cause other issues. Whole kinetic chain BS.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, if he's healthy, I feel like he's going to be around 75, 80. But again, that's you don't get your money back when you go to the window. If hey, my guy got hurt, sorry, sucks to be you. So I think my official prediction will be under for that.
Sure.
But I'm hoping I'm wrong because that means Terry's healthy and, onward and upward. All right, Dotson, we got 2 numbers. 4.5 touchdowns, and then I got a yardage number in a second. Let's start with the touchdowns. Famously led all rookies in touchdowns last year, even though he missed a bunch of time.
Yeah.
What do we got?
Like a long time.
Over under 4.5.
I'm gonna say over. That seems like a low number for a guy who I think is going to be hyper productive this year. Like I'm on the the Dotson train. I'm in it. I'm the conductor. I'm tooting the horn. I think he's going to be very, very productive this year. And so I think he's going to have probably 6 touchdowns, maybe 7 touchdowns this year. Like I'm very high on him scoring a lot. Now, the one thing I would say is that I do think there will be a lot of like touchdown cannibals in this offense, specifically the backs, especially in the low red. So I don't know. I'm high on him. I think he's going to get a ton of touches. I think he's going to get a ton of targets, and like guys like that. I played with Julio. Julio was a classic guy who got a ton of targets and ton of catches and made explosive plays all the time. But for whatever reason, only had like 2 touchdowns when I was down there in 18. So I know that doesn't always lead to touchdown production, but I don't know. I just think he's going to score a lot of touchdowns. So I'm going to be higher on that.
Yeah, 4.5 feels like a low enough number that you got to go over. God, we're such homers. We're just going over
5 touchdowns.
I know. Terry had 5. Terry had 5 the last couple of years.
And this is our Ashburn bias for sure. I just think the offense is going to be more effective, and I think he's going to be a bigger part of the offense. Like I just think he's going to be a bigger part of the offense. And again, like they're not great with receiver. Kansas City being great with receivers in the red zone, so maybe I should be more aware of that. But God, I think I'm going to go over. I'm going to go over.
You almost talked long enough to stall for what I needed. Receiving touchdowns last year for Kansas City. They didn't have a receiver over 4.5.
I know.
Which is crazy. Kelsey had 12. McKinnon had 9. 9 receiving touchdowns for McKinnon. There's no way. I don't think a running back comes close to that this year.
I think B-Rob is close to that this year.
Receiving?
I think so. I think he's going to get a lot of touches. I think I'm close is like I think he has 5 receiving touchdowns.
Okay, well, 9. I don't have.
There's a lot. I get it.
Mecole Hardman had 4. Edwards-Helaire had 3. Juju had 3. Tony had 2 in just 7 games.
Yeah.
And I could see them using Dotson in the red zone a lot.
But we just said Curtis is going to be that guy. So
I know, but I could see at different areas of the field the Kadarius Toney package going to different guys. That you want that like short, quick, bursty athlete down in the red zone. Like I could see Dotson getting those touches.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to say over. Again, we're homers.
Say over.
It's before the season starts. Let's be optimistic, guys.
Let's be optimistic. All
Ashburn glasses on.
Ashburn glasses on. All right, this one's an easy over for Ashburn glasses are on. Dotson 725.5 on yards.
Over.
If I put it at 999.5, aka is he a 1,000-yard receiver?
Over. I'm over.
You seriously? You think Dotson's a 1,000-yard receiver?
I think he's getting $1,000 this year. Easy. Like just what, dude? You've been out of practice.
He's amazing.
Dude's an animal. And like
he's so good.
And the fact that anytime he's played in the preseason, he's been the high volume target guy.
Yeah.
I'm just like, there's a reason for that. Sam's got good chemistry with him. Barring some injury, which, knock on wood, is very like he was injured last year. I think he's gonna have $1,000 this year. Grand plus. So I'm high on Jahatz, and I told you I'm the conductor of the train. Like it's Ashburn all the way. Toot toot. Jahan Dotson.
Toot toot. Jahan Dotson all aboard, leaving the station, destination FedEx Field. All right, 2 more quickly. They're plus 1,400, 4th best odds overall to lead the NFL in sacks. Will the Commanders lead the NFL in sacks this year?
4th best?
4th best odds.
I know you looked this up earlier, but do you know who was ahead of them?
I knew you were going to ask that, and I meant to go back to the page, and I did not.
So Philly, 49ers.
Philly, San Francisco were definitely 2. Why do I think it's maybe Denver? That doesn't feel right. Cleveland might have been up there, but you definitely got 2 of them. Keep talking.
Keep talking. So this one to me is the most kind of questiony, right? Because I do think that you got some very productive football players. Chase's health is a big one. John's health is a big one. I do think they are capable of leading the NFL in sacks. The other one is like Montez. Can Montez finish enough rushes to get in that double-digit sack thing? Because he's very productive. Like he's, in terms of hurries, in terms of all these metrics that you're looking at, like very, very high on him for that, but he's got to do it. So I would say, do they lead the NFL in sacks?
I can't find it on.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
So
the other thing
props,
is the offense going to be hopefully they're playing with a lead a little bit more. Hopefully the back end's a little bit better. I don't know. I'm on the fence on this. So this is the hardest one we've done so far because I think
I'm gonna say no. Here we go. It's Philly, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Washington, and Philly's pretty significant. They're plus 600. Pittsburgh plus 750. Washington's all the way up at plus 1,400. I just think also we talked about the quarterbacks earlier. Like you got a bunch of veterans who know how to get rid of the ball. Like that doesn't mean they'll be productive against this team, but like they'll probably avoid
That's a great point. Yeah.
All right. Last but not least, real test if our Ashburn glasses are on. Win total 6.5. Over under.
Over.
I walked to a window in Vegas and gave him money for it. It's over.
Did you really?
Yeah, when I was out there, I was like, I actually wanted to buy it up to 7.5, but you can't do that at a window.
Yeah, okay. I don't know what you're talking
about. I was willing to, if you give me better odds, I'm willing to take, like, say, hey, the number's 7.5 instead of 6.5.
Oh, I see.
I'm willing to bet that they will win 8 games this year.
Yeah, I think over. I mean, when you look at the schedule, though, I will say it's like, if you just based on right now, it's really, really hard to be like, oh, that's a win. This is a win. Like it's a pretty tough schedule. So I don't know. Let's see. Commander's schedule. What do you think?
All right, here we go. We got Cardinals. Are we going to do the win-loss thing?
Yeah, let's just do it real quick.
All right, Cardinals.
Win.
Let's win. We got to get to 7 here as I'm counting. Broncos at Denver.
That's a tough trip. Tough. I'm going to give it to them because I know their other ones are going to be tough. So let's give it to them.
Bills.
Loss.
Eagles.
Probably loss.
Bears. There's 3.
Thursday night. That's a tough one though. But yeah, I'll give it to them.
You're home.
Yeah. Oh, home. Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, home against Chicago.
So there's the other 3. One is that Denver game. If they win that Denver game, I think they're going to be flying high. Feel pretty good. But yeah, go ahead. So second.
At Atlanta, giving them that one.
Okay.
At New York, we'll say that's a loss.
Well, I think they split with New York. Let's hope.
Right. So that I was going to save the win for later. That was at New York. So home against Philly.
I mean, if you're just saying who's a better team, Philly's a better team. Hopefully they split, but who knows?
At New England.
That is one that is sneaky, especially with a rookie quarterback. Sam Howell versus
against
Bill Belichick.
Here's what I'm going to do, though. They're at New England, then at Seattle. I'm going to give them one of those 2.
Yeah, give them one.
Okay, now we're at 5. Home against New York, split. They're 6.
Yeah. Okay.
At Dallas.
At Dallas, probably a loss.
Okay. But, home against Miami.
I mean, put your track spikes on, boys. I'm going to say win. I think 2 is hurt. So that's 8 right there, right?
That's 7.
7.
Okay. At LA.
Oh, I mean, that's
late in the season.
That's a terrible trip, but I do think like they're a better roster, and if everyone's healthy, they should be good.
So that's 8. At New York, Christmas Eve.
And then that's the one where you're split, right? With New York?
No, we already got that. That's the Jets.
Yeah, Jets. That's a tough one.
I'll say that's New York. 49ers, home, New Year's Eve. Good luck.
Yeah.
And then Dallas to end the season.
So that's
I'm going to say they split with Dallas. That's 9 we just gave them.
Yeah. The ones that make me really nervous because of just covering this team are Atlanta, are Denver early, and Chicago early. Because those are probably games that you could win because of like where those teams are at. And I want to see a maturity that they do win those games. But I think those could, like Atlanta is it's not a tough trip, but that's a tough team to play. And the other thing I want to point out is that middle part of the schedule. I think I mentioned this when we did the schedule release. It's a lot of teams who like to run the ball a lot. How banged up are they going to be getting into that other second half of the schedule? So those are 3 games I'm really watching closely because like you can and you should win those games. If you do, I'm going to be more optimistic later on. But if it's like a slugfest and it's not pretty and it's not well coached, then obviously going to be a little bit. But going to say over just because, we're covering the team.
Ashburn glasses.
Ashburn glasses. Let's do it.
6.5 over. I promised your wife this podcast would be only 45 minutes. I'm going to keep it under 55 because we're done now. So that's it and that's all. We'll see you for the Arizona game preview later in the week. Subscribe if you're not already. It's football season. What are you waiting for, kids? Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.